The current global geopolitical climate is one of high tension between the Western powers, primarily the United States and NATO, and the authoritarian East, represented by Russia and China. This standoff brings to mind the film Red Dawn, where American teenagers defend against a Russian and Cuban invasion. As one character notes, the two toughest kids on the block will inevitably fight. Many analysts see the US, NATO, and China, Russia as these two rival superpowers on a collision course. The massive military spending and posturing on both sides makes violent confrontation seem likely. Not since the Cuban Missile Crisis has East-West tension been so palpable. The invasion of Ukraine has put NATO forces in direct opposition to Russia in the closest thing to open warfare between these powers in half a century. While the Cuban crisis ultimately cooled before shots were fired, the Ukraine war has already caused hundreds of thousands of casualties. Russia portrays NATO as the aggressor, claiming it is directly battling the alliance while supplying Ukraine. NATO counters it as merely aiding Ukraine's defense, not engaging directly. Still, providing armaments and intelligence brings the West precariously close to active involvement. British and Ukrainian air incidents in 2022 raised tensions further, as did an errant Ukrainian missile landing in Poland in November 2022. Under NATO's Article 5, an attack on one member represents an attack on all. For a time, fears of all-out NATO-Russia war filled the air. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, China makes menacing moves toward Taiwan like intruding jets after U.S. officials visit the island. Following the April 2023 trip by Speaker McCarthy, China virtually closed Taiwanese airspace with waves of fighters and floated, requiring foreign ships in the Taiwan Strait to submit to search, which Taiwan strongly opposes. Clearly, the US and China are not on the verge of open warfare, per General Mark Milley in March 2023. However, he admits armed clashes are possible via a trigger event like a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Xi Jinping states he wants China's military ready to take Taiwan by force as early as 2027. So the risk exists. Let's examine the European and Pacific theaters where such a war could occur. In Europe, NATO faces a depleted Russian military exposed by the Ukraine invasion as a shell of its former self. In the Pacific, the US military would confront China's growing but still lacking naval forces. Research group Oryx has documented over 10,000 Russian vehicle losses, including 1,900 tanks and over 200,000 troops killed or wounded. Russia has even reactivated antiquated Korean War-era tanks, and lost numerous senior officers due to reliance on top-down control, lacking the flexibility of NATO's decentralized command structure. Pre-invasion, many considered Russia's military second only to the US. But its poor logistics, outdated equipment and inability to control the skies or provide air cover in Ukraine has proven otherwise. Only its artillery and nuclear forces remain credible. Meanwhile, NATO boasts over 3.5 million troops, though mostly from the US and Turkey. Other key members Germany, France, the UK, Poland and Italy field over 160,000 each. While primarily defensive, NATO has shown willingness to supply weapons to embattled non-members like Ukraine when interests align. The invasion reinvigorated NATO unity and defense spending. NATO can field sophisticated tanks like Germany's Leopard 2, the US Abrams, the British Challenger 2 and the French Leclerc, along with late-model F-35 stealth fighters. Russia still relies on outdated aircraft like the MiG-29, MiG-31 and Su-27. Though equal in numbers to NATO, most Russian planes are older non-upgraded models, many in disrepair. The lopsided European matchup contrasts with the Pacific, where China's military is still ascending. While Russia was bleeding strength, China continued modernizing its forces, prompting neighbors like Japan, Australia, India and the Philippines to hike military budgets. Still, China lacks key capabilities to defeat the US Navy. Its weaknesses suggest it would be wise to avoid war for 5-10 years if possible. China's Navy now has numerous modern destroyers, but they lack mature air defense missiles, relying on outdated short-range systems awaiting replacement. China's aircraft carrier fleet numbers just 3, only one of which has the advanced catapults of America's 11 supercarriers. The other 2 use less capable ski-jump designs. China's carrier aircraft are also wanting. Their J-15 naval fighter, nicknamed the flopping fish, is underpowered and limited by the ski-jump carriers. The nation's deadlier J-20 stealth fighter isn't suited to carrier operations. Pilot training is another challenge, as China lacks suitable carrier-capable training aircraft. Rumors suggest China is building a fourth carrier, but it lacks sufficient pilots for its current ships. Moreover, the U.S. can count on support from wary neighbors like Japan, which is building a pair of the world's largest destroyers, and Australia, which will operate nuclear subs with American and British help. India, Vietnam, Indonesia and others are also bulking up their navies after China's South China Sea aggression. But China's biggest vulnerability is its heavy reliance on imported oil and gas. Interdicting these sea lanes would crater China's civilian trucking fleets in months and devastate fertilizer production and agriculture in less than a year, collapsing the economy despite naval victories. Food imports would also plummet, as China imports up to 75% of its supply. China would need to win any war outright in a matter of months before economic free fall and famine take hold, a dubious prospect against the concentrated firepower of the US and its allies. The lesson of Ukraine is that even smaller countries can resist major powers given today's technology. Taiwan has prepared defenses for 70 years and possesses geographical advantages as an island. Any alliance between China and Russia is also built on a shaky foundation. In a major war, Russia's inept military would likely be crippled within weeks, leaving China largely alone. Ukraine revealed Russia is no peer to the US or NATO. The reasons for Russian failure run deep: pervasive corruption, lack of skilled NCOs, poor logistics and training. Russia can simply never match the economic might of the US and Europe, who boast over 40% of global GDP. The post-invasion sanctions also severely damaged Russia's economy. Despite selling advanced weapons to China, Russia knows the technology is often copied and sold at cut-rate prices by the Chinese. Evidence shows China recognizes its dominant position in the relationship. China refuses to condemn Russia at the UN, but rejects arming it. Recent Russia-China summits produced no concrete deals. China abstains from overt backing of Russia's aggression as it tries to boost its global prestige. Yet Xi must contend with regime hardliners advocating stronger support. Putin's rumored poor health and apparent purging of potential rivals raise doubts about his hold on power. Why fully back a potentially unstable ally? Between demographic decline, economic weakness and catastrophic war losses, Russia and China may feel time is running out for their expansionist goals. But acting rashly before achieving military readiness could doom them nonetheless. Their future choices will significantly impact the region and the world.